Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode of Mental Debrief, hosted by Tonique Media. Today is our second episode where we'll be talking about escapism. My name is Emma Wright. I am your host, and hosting alongside me is our very own Cade Guerrero.
Hey, how's it going? Glad to be here for another episode. It looks beautiful where you're at right now. It's a little ugly here in Albuquerque. Yeah, but we tried to film an episode yesterday, but it wouldn't be a Tonique podcast without its technical difficulties. So, yeah, we had to scrap it, but hey, it's always good to talk about it again, you know? I don't mind.
Yeah, I don't mind at all. We can kind of get into our flow a little bit, and we've already got some great content. So now I'm recording today's episode really excited I was already excited, but now I'm even more excited to dig into it a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So yesterday we were talking about escapism. And I know this was one of the points that we wanted to kind of touch on as we lay out our mental debrief agenda. But yeah, what we talked about yesterday, let's try to dive back into it. Healthy and unhealthy, positive and negative forms of escapism.
Yeah.
So escapism, the one thing that we started off with.
Right. And escapism, like you just mentioned, there are healthy and unhealthy versions, and there's always kind of that too much of a good thing. And basically, escapism is what we touched on last week when we were talking was removing yourself from your situation, whether it's a bad mental health day, episode, prolonged thing, whether you're dealing with stress, and you're using distractions to kind of get yourself away from that, make yourself forget about it. So obviously, there are good ways to do that, like in meditation or exercise. You're pushing out whatever that stress or anxiety is, or even depression, and you're moving it into something that's productive. Unhealthy or negative versions of escapism would be like, drugs or alcohol, something like that. Or even being reclusive, like keeping to yourself and not communicating with other people. That's kind of a form of escapism. You're removing yourself from contact with the outside world, maybe not checking your phone as much. And of course, you can do these things in a healthful way, but it becomes problematic when it is habitual. That's in the definitions that I was kind of reading online. The habitual is key. Habitual distractions from an unpleasant situation.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And we kind of talked about our own forms of escapism. Like for myself, I used to use alcohol as a form of escape in kind of day-to-day life. And sometimes I would, definitely overconsume and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. I'm very guilty of that too.
Yeah.
I was most interested yesterday when you were talking about, using alcohol to kind of escape, because like college was stressful, things like that, changes and etc. But you also got some positive reinforcement from it, from like the friend groups that you were hanging out with. And I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, totally. So what I kind of dove into was that, like, in college, I was using that escape in college because it was all the stress with exams, papers, maintaining a certain standard in the collegiate world. But it'd be kind of like, all right, we just got done with study hall, let's go to the bars and keep studying there, or just like study for a whole day at a bar, just like get really, really trashed. You know what I mean? But yeah, it became a thing too. It was like everybody started expecting this from me, like expecting this guy to be like this huge partier guy and stuff like that. And it got really like mentally took a toll on me. And now, it's like whatever, but I definitely had to check that and being like, all right, you know what? I'm actually like over consuming, and I'm using this for the exact wrong reasons. Like I still have a drink every once in a while, right? And like, that's totally cool. Everything's great in moderation. But during this time, it was all for stress and to kind of use it as a coping mechanism. Mm-hmm. So then I started like running a lot, and then that eventually turned unhealthy too, because then I would just like run like 4 miles no matter what day, no matter how bad I hurt and stuff like that. But yeah, that was kind of my experiences with those two forms, negative and positive, and then a positive kind of turning into a negative where I had to check it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
there's absolutely, like, I know people who are, and have known people in the past who are totally addicted to exercise and even meditation. I was actually just having a conversation with someone about this the other day, how some people meditate and like they're doing it for, to kind of almost to say that they're doing it and not for the actual benefit. And it becomes so structured that you kind of lose the point. Same with exercise,
Mhm.
like those people that are forcing themselves to exercise, like you were saying, you got blisters on your feet and you would still go run even though it was excruciating. Um, and that's kind of when we're talking about those too much of a good thing.
Mhm.
So did you, I remember I was talking about this a little bit yesterday, but in your college years while you were drinking a lot, did you have kind of this aha moment of like, oh shit, this is the wrong thing? And then again, when you were running a lot, did you kind of have come to this realization that at any point in time?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think the moment when I realized is like it was weird because when you drink so much and you get really hungover and like the only remedy you think is to drink more.
Yeah, hair of the dog.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was like, it was like 3 days straight, and then I
Hmm.
was like, oh my god, this is like like an absolute problem right now. And I like went over it the other day too. That I always use that excuse, like I'm in college. Like I'm in college. Like what do you
Hmm.
expect for me to do? Like even my parents would see me drink, and they were being like, oh my god, so is this our child right here? But
Oh God.
yeah, but it was like whatever, you know what I mean? That was always my excuse, and that's what I was kind of turned to. But yeah, definitely like after like a couple of days after I was like, oh my God, like I cannot keep drinking. Like that's terrible. And all this during this time, I was going through this weird part of my life where, you know what it's like when you're exiting college after being in school for like all your life.
Hmm.
It was
Yeah.
very terrifying. It was very terrifying for me becoming an adult. So
Yeah.
during that whole time, that's when I was drinking the most. It was at the tail end. And so when I started running and when I finally figured out the moment where I was like, this is kind of unhealthy, was literally my feet were like bleeding. I had to like bandage my feet. I didn't get into that a lot, but yeah, it was pretty bad. Well, I hurt my knee and I ran on like a really bad knee for a while too. So
God.
yeah. Mhm. But it was
Yeah,
like
that's
also at
intense.
the same time chasing a high,
Hmm.
you know? Like, it was like, I guess, it's like when you take antidepressants, if you start taking them more and more and like overdose, like not overdosing literally, but it was kind of like that. That was like
Hmm.
my medication, and I was abusing that medication.
For sure. Yeah, and antidepressants are interesting too because they're so different from person to person. I've personally tried a couple of different antidepressants. One of them made me
Mhm.
really sick. One of them made me so moody it was ridiculous. I would say that I could feel the crazy coursing through my veins. It was like all the different hormones at once. It was absurd, and it would cause really high highs and really low lows. Um, and then I eventually got off antidepressants and turned to, I have like an anti anxiety medication now. I think it's mostly for panic disorders. And that has helped with my depression, like as a second hand, helps my anxiety, helps my depression. I'm super grateful for it. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, those antidepressants are interesting because everybody kind of reacts to them a little bit differently. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And sometimes they work for a little while and then sometimes they drop off. But it is nice to be able to find something that does provide some relief, just as long as again you're not abusing it, you're not using that high. Kind of like maybe this is too far of an example, but like ecstasy makes you feel great, but it depletes the rest of your serotonin and you're left with nothing. Then you've got your suicide Tuesdays, and that's a really unhealthy place to be.
Yeah, same thing with cocaine.
Yeah.
You get like those really, really quick highs that's like a euphoria almost. And then Yeah, you find yourself in kind of like this dark space.
Mm-hmm. And so you got to kind of
Yeah.
weigh, like, is it worth it, And everybody's
Mm.
got their thing. But moving on to another type of escapism, this one is super interesting because it's very involuntary. Like, these are the things that we talked about. These are voluntary things that you can do, whether it's drinking, whether it's smoking, other kinds of drugs, exercise, all these things. You're removing yourself from your current reality as a distraction. But dissociation is entirely involuntary. And dissociation happens, it happens to me in particular, but it happens to people who suffer from anxiety, PTSD, things like that. And I struggle with both of those things. And dissociation is basically when your body, or when you experience a trigger to something that is anxiety inducing or causes you to flash back into a traumatic event, your body just goes, nope, we don't want to deal with any emotions. This is dangerous territory. We're going to feel nothing whatsoever. And then you just kind of end up living in this dead-end space where everything around you feels very, very foreign. It's a scary place to be in. So it's not a pleasant form of escape. It's your brain just goes, we don't want to deal with this anymore. You're done. And it's tough to pull out of. It can last hours or it can last days. And the ones that last days are very, very disorienting. And it's
Mm.
interesting because at its root, like, this is a protective mechanism. Your body's like, we're too high stress. This is too intense. We're going to remove ourselves. But it's not fun. It's not a fun space to be in. And I know you were kind of talking about maybe experiencing something similar, or that is in itself.
Yeah, yeah, totally. For me, it becomes when I am suffering from just high stress, high anxiety, especially when I have a whole bunch of things at once, right? So I deal with like a lot of things every single day, from like beginning to end. And sometimes if I feel like I don't have, can like, if I feel like I can't get a control of all the things at once and all day, my mind will go completely blank. It'll be like the 1,000-mile stare. Like, you know what that is, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's like that exactly, where there's just like a ringing and you're just like, oh my God, it's insane.
yeah. You were saying like someone could give you like horrific news and you would just feel nothing.
Yeah, like I don't have any pets, but like if they were like, hey, your pet just got ran over, I'd be like, what? I guess.
Or
I
like,
don't
what
know.
do we need to do next?
Yeah, exactly. Like, all right. Like I wouldn't respond in a human way. I'm just like a robot. You know what I mean? Just very blank.
Yeah. And is it because you've kind of, I mean, you're so high stressed, have you like reached your threshold, your capacity of dealing with external events?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's
that's
pretty
really
crazy.
interesting. That is crazy. I know,
Mhm.
and I trust that you've got some healthy forms of escapism, some coping mechanisms to help you kind of mediate that. Like, I know I kind of try to do the same things for myself, even though I'm not very good at it sometimes.
Yeah. I definitely try to meditate. I read. Um my healthy form is finding nice solitude,
Hmm.
like time for myself.
Yeah.
Like if I put time like to the side to kind of be with myself, evaluate myself, kind of just be like my best friend for a bit and just like talk to myself, then the rest of the week goes by pretty good.
Nice. And we'll get to,
Usually I
in these
use,
mental
yeah.
health. Sorry, I was going to say, when we get through these mental health episodes, we'll also talk about the talking to yourself, because I'm sure that's an episode.
Yeah, for sure. I can go a whole episode talking about that.
Oh, me too. Yeah, being your own best friend is a cool way to do it. So I'm interested to hear about those kind of what people's healthy coping mechanisms are. We also, I think, we have a lot of ways to kind of like unwind on our own, and it's important to check in with yourself, because just because you have time in your schedule, like physical time, doesn't necessarily mean you have emotional time to tack on more things. I definitely struggled with, when I was trying to kind of pare back and heal myself a little bit. People would ask me for things, to do things with them, to accept things, and I would have a really hard time setting the boundary, and I would just kind of like yes man everything, and I would overwhelm myself But I kind of started to learn and talk to myself a little bit more, be my own best friend, and say, like, okay, just because you have the time on your physical calendar doesn't mean you have the emotional time. And that has been a really helpful lesson for me.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I'm like
Yeah.
that too. I'm a yes man. Like, especially with like Tonique, they're like, hey, you want to start this project? I'm like, yes, let's do it now. What about this one? I'm like, yeah, totally. Let's do as much as we humanly possibly can.
Yeah.
And then I
Let's do it
realized,
yesterday.
yeah, I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah, totally. I
You
enter
created a
that same
monster.
realm. All right.
Yeah. Well, kind of to wrap this up a little bit, just because I think we've hit all the things that we wanted to talk about. We talked about healthy and unhealthy versions, kind of recognizing when you're healthy might be becoming unhealthy. We talked about dissociating.
Mhm.
I think I kind of want to wrap this up with just a reflection, because I'm not sure, who's listening to this podcast and whether this is resonating with you because you're like, oh my God, yeah, I've been there before, or maybe you're just kind of realizing you're in the middle of something. I don't know where our listeners are at. But at the end of the day, if you're working through something, whether it is a mental health challenge, whether you're escaping from a form of escapism, whatever it is, being your own best friend really is key, because you can't be too hard on yourself when you're working through something like that. Healing is not a linear process whatsoever. And Cade and I could both tell you that. I think if you ask anyone, they could tell you that you're going to go on the roller coaster for a long time. So just having some compassion for yourself and knowing that you're trying, and that's the biggest part. That's the most important part.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
Well,
All
cool.
right.
Yeah, I'll wrap it up there. Thanks for hanging out with us today. And if you want to like jump on the podcast too, just like shoot us an email on the website.
Absolutely.
Definitely have you on. Where this is
Mhm.
to help create a safe space and a healthy space to talk about our mental quirks. Right? Is that what we
Yeah.
settled on?
I think so.
So-
Yeah. Because we've all got them. And if you're
Yeah.
denying you have them, then I don't know. I don't know what to
Right,
tell
yeah.
you.
Yeah, but in the meantime, like I said, subscribe to our newsletter, subscribe to our YouTube. We'll be back next week, same time with less technical issues. We promise.
Mhm.
And
Do you
make
really
sure to
promise
check
this
out
time?
Soul 48. Oh, I swear. Yeah. Anyway, but make sure to check out Soul 48, and we'll be back. See you later.
See you later.